Welcome everybody. We got here. Happy Tuesday, we'll call it. I guess, right? Give us
Absolutely.
just a minute here. We'll do kind of some quick intros and housekeeping stuff, and then we got a decent amount to cover today. Kind of give you a full kind of A to Z gamut of how this whole thing works, and then hopefully, if we do our jobs right, you'll understand where you fit into this whole financial aid scholarship spectrum, right? So hopefully we can kind of clear up some myths and we will we'll get you all rolling. But yeah, just give us one more minute because we had a pretty good crowd tonight, which was nice to see. So, and you folks, so Peggy, these Lexington folks, this Lexington community here locally, is a little bit of a fancy community, like our buddies that we presented to in Newton last week, right? We did Newton South and North last week, and I'm local here, guys. I grew up on the North Shore in Ipswich. We have a Salem, or we have an office in Salem. My family and I live in Beverly, but this is the fairy godmother of financial aid herself, the budget queen, Peggy Keogh. She's out there in Seattle, a Jersey native, so she's an East Coast gal, and she's very much still true to that. Um,
Yes, it never leaves you, never
Never
leaves you.
leaves you, right? May God forbid.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm bringing the big guns for you good folks of Lexington here, and just tell us, just throw this in the chat. I mean, we want this to be interactive, right? For you guys to get the most out of this, arguably the best, I think, some of the best value we can provide tonight are answering the questions that are important to you all, right? What are the things that are keeping you up at night? Well, please fire at will. It can be random, it can be personal, you can be anonymous. That's the nice thing about it being virtual here. But just tell us what's the high school graduating class of your kids? Just kind of curious who's showing up. I think it's primarily 26s, and maybe we have some 27s, 28s, maybe some class 2025 that's just got past kind of decision day. But tell us where you guys are in the process, and again, please take us up on that offer and just fire away with any and all questions. Yep, two kids back to back. Peggy knows a little bit about that and some. Um,
Yeah.
but look at so I don't think I said my name. I'm Matt Carpenter. I'm a founder of College A Pro here. I've been doing this for a heck of a long time, 20 years. It's all I've done my entire career. This is kind of all I know, my first and only language here. So hopefully I can speak it a little bit like I know what I'm talking about. But yeah, we're gonna take you through again how this whole thing works and what you can do. Peggy and I do a lot of media stuff. We have a podcast, and all the news has been crazy with the Department of Education and loans going back into repayment. And yes, this is a hard process, and it's complex and it's opaque and it's expensive and it's scary and all this stuff. That's all real, but no matter what happens out there, you guys are still in complete control over this. Everybody has a path to an affordable outcome and getting good return on investment. And there's different paths, right? That's what makes it a little bit opaque and challenging. But that's the takeaway, right? If you're engaged, if you're educated, if you understand how this works for your family, you're going to be in great shape. And so you're doing the right thing just by showing up here. And we hope that you can leave here, just in better position than you are right now. But Peggy, why don't you say hi and then we can kind of dive in and get them going.
Yeah, 100%, reiterate what Matt said. Kudos to you for being here. This is kind of an opaque, deliberately not transparent process from many of the colleges. So it's a little bit hard to navigate, but it's just like anything else. Like we're here, Matt's only done this, and you can see how old he is. It's been quite a few years, right? So you're in great hands. I have twins who are done with college. So I've been through this. I know what it feels like. The person said back to back. I get it. It was a package set for me. So if I screwed up on both of them, I didn't have anybody to learn from. So I get it from the parent side, and I've got the professional side, which actually what caused me to really just focus on this when I was in the financial industry. So this is what gets us both out of bed. You're here. And there's always craziness in this field. It's just now it just happens to be all these changes with the current administration. It was the FAFSA. There's just always something. It's just life. So we're here to help, and I know everybody will learn a lot tonight, or at least grab a few gems if you've already been around the block. So Matt mentioned we are here to answer your questions as best we can. If it's something that we want you to talk to somebody on our team, we're gonna give you a link to do that. We're happy to do that for our high school partners like Lexington. So if we do that, go ahead and take advantage of that.
And I
Put your
just put
question.
I just put that link right in there right now.
Yeah, yeah, Matt already did it. So put your questions in the Q&A. I know we said, hey, put that in the chat about your graduating year, because that's where we're going to look for questions instead of two places. And as Matt said earlier, you can be anonymous. So if you want to ask something that's a little personal and maybe you don't want to link to you, that's great. Just click that box. And the other thing I'll share is we are recording this, so you will get the recording, because that's the number one question we get. So if you get distracted or you want a family member to watch it or whatever it is, we got you covered. So you're good to go. So let me share my screen and let's get going here. Um, I don't know that Matt mentioned this. He said he's been doing this for a couple decades, but he's one of the co-founders at College Aid Pro. So if you've been on our other webinars, you've heard this, but this is who we are. This is our mission, and this last part of our mission is really what we're doing tonight: empowering you to shop smarter for college. The more you know, and the more you take that knowledge and you apply it, or you get further support, you will be on a good journey with your kids. Just trust me on that from a parent side and professional side. So we are very mission driven here at CAP. And there we are, the happy couple. So everybody received an email earlier today. We can see a lot of you already did it, so that's great. But if you haven't, Matt will put a link in the chat. Definitely set up your free MyCap account. This is a software we created just for families. You click get started for free, create a username and password. There's a few onboarding questions, and then you'll be off to the races. We will take you through the whole process. I didn't see any 2025s in the chat. So you guys are all on this part of the beginning part of the journey where you're planning, you're helping your child build their college list. That's where we start, and we go all the way through. And tonight we're going to show you a sample family and show you how powerful it is. So if you haven't done it, definitely go ahead and do it. You can put into up to 3 schools. If you're answering the onboarding questions and you're like, I don't know that answer, it's okay. Fill it in with your best guess. You're going to always be able to go back in and change all of those numbers. And you're probably going to want to at different times because things are going to change in your life. So you don't have to worry about, I don't know that answer, I'm going to finish it later. Just do your best guess, and then you can go look things up or ask your spouse or whatever. So go ahead and get that done if you haven't done it yet, because now I'm going to start talking about financial aid, and you're going to actually be able to see your situation as I'm talking, kind of at the meta level, how all this works and what some of these numbers mean and why you're doing certain things. So go ahead and do that. So let's kick in here and let's talk about, high level again, and then we'll get more granular about financial aid. So the biggest takeaway, and an article just came out in the New York Times that we were talking about in our podcast this morning, all about this. And Matt and I were like, yeah, because we know about this, but many consumers do not. Is all these colleges are discounting their costs. So we all know for decades the cost of attendance, which is tuition and fees, room and board, books, travel, personal expenses, has been going up, way faster than the rate of inflation, right? It's out of control. The most expensive schools are over $100,000 now per year, in case you didn't know that. But it kind of doesn't matter if you know what you're doing, because all of these schools are offering discounts. Just like you go to the store, Nordstrom's, Target, wherever, Kohl's has always got stuff on sale. They're on sale, but they're all discounting their sticker price, if you will, that cost of attendance in different ways. They're using different instruments. So let's talk through this. The first way they can discount their total costs is through need-based grants. And as the name kind of tells you, you have to have financial need. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute. Like, how do you know if you have financial need? And a lot of people assume they don't have financial need for various reasons. Maybe their sister didn't, or their neighbor told them they're not going to, whatever. And they do, especially as prices go up. So I will just plant that seed. So need-based grants, this is free money. You're not paying it back. It can come from the federal government, your state, and the colleges. And from the colleges, we call that institutional grants. That's by far the biggest source of need-based grants. So that's the first bucket. The middle bucket on the slide is called merit-based scholarship. So this is the flip side. This is based on your child, grades, test scores, sports, music, other talents, leadership, whatever it happens to be. It doesn't matter how much money you make. Office of Admissions is going to step in and start this discounting game many times, but way before they know your ability to pay. And a lot of kids that get merit aid on paper, their family should be able to write a full check, and the college really doesn't care. They're discounting to try and entice that family to pick their school, basically. That's what's going on. So those first two buckets are the free money. You want to maximize those two. The third bucket we call self-help. So this is loans, work study. So loans are a part of a lot of families' strategy. It's not a bad thing. It's just reasonable loan amounts are what's key. Okay. And then work study is basically it's a need-based program because the government pays half the wage, but your child obviously has to go get a job. So they got to work, you get a paycheck, and then you decide as a family, hey, that's going to cover books or that's beer and pizza money, whatever you decide as a family. So those are the three buckets where this discounting happens. So let's take a few minutes and we're going to talk about need-based aid, but before we do that, I want to just show you an actual example of this so that you can see what happens. This is an actual student from out of my neck of the woods. So this is University of Washington, our flagship, kind of like your UMass, right? UW, we call it, and then Gonzaga. So public and private. So huge difference in cost of attendance. And this is from a couple of years ago. So the numbers are a little bit lower, but still the order of magnitude between the two is the same, right? 35,000 versus almost 77,000. So it's easy to look at that and say, well, 77,000, man, no way. That's over 300,000 bucks. There's no way we can afford it. That you don't even look there. Well, look at what happened with this actual student. This family has a student aid index, and I'm going to talk about that in a few minutes, what that is, of 30,000. And look at the package that this student got at University of Washington, full price. The student got loans, but I'm not putting loans in there because loans are not the free money. I'm only taking out the free money. Look at Gonzaga. Gonzaga dropped significantly to about $40,000. So it's still more than UW, but order of magnitude much, much less. So a family could sit down and say, all right, at 77, we're not looking at it. But if we have a clue that this could be our net cost, and that's what we tell you in our software, that's a different conversation. That's something where you say, yeah, if that's the case, if we're going to get in that ballpark, then we might keep Gonzaga on the list. So this is not rare. This happens all the time. And this is what we want to help you be able to understand and find for your family. All right. So how does it work on the need-based aid front? Remember those need-based grants. So how do they decide if they're giving those to you? Pretty simple equation. Cost of attendance minus something called the student aid index slash expected family contribution. The FAFSA changed a couple years ago and they changed the terminology to SAI student aid index. But there's a lot of, well, a bunch of schools that I think a bunch of your kids will be looking at that are still calling it expected family contribution. So we've left that on there so it won't be confusing. These numbers get generated when you submit financial aid forms. And so this is what the college does. They take that amount and they think, all right, the Jones family can pay $60,000. Not that's the maximum the Jones family will ever pay, but that gives the college an idea of your affordability index. So they cost 80, you have an SAI of 60. They say, all right, there's $20,000 of need. That doesn't mean the college swoops in and says, here's your need-based grant for 20,000. Okay, we're good to go. It doesn't usually work that way. Many colleges don't meet 100% of need. And then most colleges, even if they do, some of that might be loans, some of that might be that work study that I talked about. So those are all the things that are really, really important to understand in the need-based space, but pretty simple formula. So now let's talk about how this SAI gets calculated. What makes up the SAI? There's two main buckets. There's assets and there's income. And this is for both the student and the parent or parents. And throughout tonight, we're going to define different family structures who's part of the calculation of the two different SAIs. And by the way, these will be calculated right on your dashboard when you set up your account. And you can see that, all the people that have. So on the asset front, the biggest takeaway is the assets that are considered are your non-retirement assets. So if you have nice 401k, 403b, IRAs, including Roth IRA, that's a retirement account. Those are all off the table in the calculation of the SAI/EFC. Everything else is on the table. So that means checking, savings, CDs, stock, bond portfolio, all of that stuff is part of it. If you've been fortunate enough to be able to save in a college savings account, usually people use 529s, which is under that umbrella. That is also considered non-retirement money. Now, there's a few nuances there that I just want to go into. So, if the parent owns the 529, which is the typical way it's done if somebody outside the family doesn't own it, which I'll talk about in a minute. So, if mom or dad or the guardian, whoever owns this account, and the student, the child, is the beneficiary, then it's an asset of the parents. And that is really, really important because parent assets are assessed a little shy of 6%, whereas um, kids' assets are assessed at 20 or 25%. So massive. Matt likes to give an example. If your child has $10,000, that's a decent amount of money, and that can move the needle, right? It's 2000 or 2500 of your SAI right there, right? So that's why you hear in the media, don't put assets in your kid's name, which may be true for some people, may not. But the key takeaway here is that's your asset. When you're filling out forms, don't get confused and put that in your child's bucket. Now, if grandma or grandpa have a 529 and they own it for their grandchild, very common. That's not even in the mix because that person isn't in the household. So you don't even want to include that. And like for me, and I saw a mom who said she has back to back. Well, if that mom has a 529 for each one of her kids, you're only putting the balance of the 529 for the child that you're submitting the forms for, the child that's going to college. And for me, it just would have been one and one because they were going to college at the same time. That's a nice change that came about a couple years ago. So I know I just threw a lot at you. Parent owns a 529, it's a parent asset. Grandma owns it, not included. Sibling accounts, not included on the FAFSA. So that's how the 529s work. If your child happens to have what's called an UGMA or an UTMA, that's what we call a custodial account. This used to be the only game in town. 529s didn't exist 20 years ago. So that was the way to give money to a minor. That's the opposite of a 529. Actually is an asset of the beneficiary, the child, the student. So there are strategies to move that out of the child's name. That would be something you'd want to talk to us about one-on-one because there's tax ramifications. You need to see if it's even going to help you. There's a bunch of moving pieces there, but I am planting that seed because that is not a 529. So that is looked at differently and it is an asset of the student. And then lastly, when it comes to accounts, jointly owned accounts, if very common, you have your son on there with you, then Bank of America savings account, that can be an asset of yours then because you are on that registration. And remember, that's a better way to do it because you are assessed at a lower rate. Then the last piece here is real estate. So any real estate that you have that's not the primary home you live in. It's not the home you live in, that's on the table across the board. So if you have a second home, if you have vacant land that you use for hunting or whatever that happens to be, the equity in that property, which means the market value minus a lien, a HELOC, any of that, the difference between those two, that's your equity. And that is included on both financial aid forms. The key thing here is to not inflate your market value of your property. You don't want to lie, but you want to find the lowest defensible value. And then there's discounts that you can put on that because, as we all know, when you sell property, you don't keep all your money. In the state of Washington, I actually pay sales tax when you sell your house, literally. So you don't walk away with all the money. That's your secondary real estate. The primary home, the home you live in, most colleges aren't going to look at that at all, which can be a huge planning opportunity for you live in a part of the world like I do where real estate is has appreciated nicely. So some of you guys could be sitting on really nice equity, and that's awesome, right? Some schools they're not even going to ask about it, but there are a group of schools that do, and we're going to get into that in a few minutes. But same thing applies there. You don't want to overvalue your real estate. You want to be honest, but put the lowest defensible market value for your real estate, which will then your equity will be lower when you do that. So that's the
Yeah, Peggy,
asset piece.
let me butt in quick here, buddy.
Sure, sure.
You just got some good questions. And one of them was like, hey, elaborate on is debt considered, right? And we say like no, but because in short, what we think of is kind of like traditional debt, my credit cards and my car loan and things like this. That is not technically considered in any of these formulas. Now, there are opportunities. We can go out of our way to bring this information to colleges and maybe use that in an appeal, right? To say, hey, this didn't show up on our financial aid applications, but it really impacts our ability to pay for college, right? And we'll kind of tease that concept before we cut out tonight, which is again the appeal part of the process, going back and getting a better deal than the initial offer. The debt that is kind of I guess real or can help us in the formula is, Peggy just said it, for those colleges that do consider the equity in our primary residence. Well, if we have a debt against that property, that shrinks the size of that asset. The same goes for our business, right? If we're a business owner, right, debt on our business shrinks the size of that asset, or other properties, whether it's real estate investment properties or vacation homes, etc. So that's why it's not kind of clear cut when we say is debt considered the short answer would be no, but there's kind of more to add to that.
Yeah, yeah. Yep, very true. Same thing with stock. Like if you have a margin on it, that's like a lien, right? That's like a lien on the stock. So and the schools don't all, the forms don't all ask about that, but you should have open sharing when it benefits you at the colleges. So we'll talk about that
That's
a
kind of the
little bit.
takeaway. That's kind
Yeah,
of the
we'll
takeaway,
talk about that at the end, but yeah, this is where you want to have open sharing when it benefits you. You don't need to openly share when it doesn't. Okay, so let's talk about the other piece here. Remember, I said that the SAI is assets and income. So on the income side, it is not. Oh, the other thing I didn't mention with assets is it's literally real-time value. If you want to be this exacting, it can be the day you're submitting the form, you look up your portfolio and put the value. Income, not so. Income is what we call prior year. This has been in place for a while. President Obama put it in, so years ago. And it's a 2-year look back, basically. So I know we have a lot of class of 2026 parents. You can see right on this slide, when you start doing those forms this fall, it's going to be all about last year. It's all about 2024. Writings on the wall. It is what it is. If you have a 27, which I know somewhere on here, you are in that tax year now. So don't create income that you don't need to. Obviously, if you make a nice living, you're not going to quit your job. You're not going to turn down a promotion or a nice bonus, right? But every year, Matt and I see people and they have a giant capital gain that could be avoided, or they took a distribution that they then repaid, but there it is, right? And they didn't need to do that. So just keep that in mind during these years, because there's going to be 4 tax years. You want to stay as lean and mean as you can on that tax return, because parental income is by far the biggest driver. It's mostly based on your AGI, your adjusted gross income. There's a few add-ins on top of that, but that's the biggest part of it. Student income is a big part of this, but fortunately, one, kids don't make a lot of money usually. And two, for the schools that only require the FAFSA, which we'll get into in a little bit, you can see on the slide here, they have an income protection allowance of over $11,000. So if your child works throughout the school year and has a great job all summer and makes 8 grand, which is a lot, it's a wash. Like they're good. Like that is not going to affect your SAI. That's not going to be a part of the SAI. So that's huge. That's a nice piece there, but kids, I see a lot of kids that don't make any money, right? So that they don't really, there's nothing to take advantage of. So income, flip side, is a 2 year look back. So that's why it's good to start this process earlier. So we've got a 29 on here, I think, too. The earlier, the better to understand how these things work. So that's the need-based aid. So if some of you, and I'm sure some of you are, you're looking at your account that you set up and you're like, all right, that's nice, Peg, but my SAIs along the top are pretty big. They might be 120,000, they might be more. And Matt and I have seen this hundreds and hundreds of times through the years. And those people aren't necessarily able to pay 90, even 80, 100,000 a year full price, or honestly, you don't want to. You don't feel like the value's there. We totally get it. There's going to be a different discount. You remember that middle bucket I talked about on my slide? That's going to be the name of the game for you. So I'm going to turn it over to Matt so he can talk about the other free money bucket, the merit scholarships. Oh, you're muted, bud.
Yeah, sorry, I was pounding away in Q&A. Lexington's starting to get hot here, Peggy. Starting to catch up to Newton here, but they still got their work cut out for them. So keep the questions going, guys. So look at just by nature of your zip code, there's going to be a percentage of you that aren't going to be eligible for need-based financial aid. But and I guess there's some positives of that. It's like, okay, I guess we got a decent income and we have some resources, et cetera, et cetera. But I can all but guarantee you, most of you that fit into that bucket are not looking at yourselves going, I have no problem. I can pay $100,000 a year for college times 4 years times 3 kids or whatever. So I mean, one of the there's a lot of inherent flaws with this system. I would argue towards the top of that list is they really don't take cost of living and your zip code for that matter into effect in the way that they should in the formula. Technically there's a very small formula on both the institutional model and the federal model that accounts for cost of living, but honestly it really has no meaningful impact, right? And to oversimplify here, they're saying, hey, if you're a family of five and you make have a $200,000 income in Lexington, just outside of Boston, we're going to treat you the same as if you had that same income living just outside Des Moines, Iowa, right? And we all know it doesn't work that way. That's not just a practical way to be evaluated, but here we are. So I share all that to say, number one, just like, I don't know, soften the blow for some of you that are going to see what the federal government thinks you can pay per year once you set up your account with us, if you haven't already, or some of you are looking at that number right now going, these guys, their algorithm must be broken, right? So how do we get discounts, right? If we fit somewhere into that bucket, and by the way, you're still going to be eligible for need-based financial aid if you make $200,000. I should have used a different number, but how do we get discounts even if we're not eligible for need-based financial aid? Because some of you, again, probably are. That's going to be the deal here, and even the fairy godmother of financial aid could not change that. Well, the biggest and the most obvious way is we need to figure out, well, which colleges are going to give my kids scholarships, and more importantly, which ones are going to be good fits for them, right? It's something we say every day is like, hey, look, I can give you hundreds of schools that are going to give you really meaningful scholarships, but if your kid's not excited to go there or it's not a good fit, that's borderline useless information. So how do we marry the two things there? I'm going to show you exactly how to do that in just a few minutes here, but there's a few things I want to talk about that, in my experience, is not necessarily common knowledge as it applies to merit-based scholarships. The first one is his second bullet here, and that is a lot of folks that either assume correctly or incorrectly that they're not eligible for financial aid. They say, "Well, I've heard those applications themselves are a pain in the ass. I'm not even going to do them. I'm not going to bother with them." Um, we're going to push back against that in a major way for a multitude of reasons. Okay, and there's about five big ones, but one of those five is what we're talking about here. I always like to use NYU as an example, right? I'm sure some of your kids, are considering NYU. It's an amazing school. Why wouldn't they? But as you also are probably aware, pretty stinking expensive. They have scholarships there, but if you want to be considered for them, if you want to throw your hat in the ring for them, you have to do both of their financial aid applications. That means the FAFSA and the CSS profile. I use that as kind of a bell cow example. Obviously, it's not the only school. So by not doing these forms, oftentimes we could be leaving money on the table. And I promise, and we have a lot of data to support this. A lot of people do. Too many people don't leave money on the table, especially free money. Okay. Almost in the same breath, I want to say that again, in my experience, this is not necessarily common knowledge. Not every school offers scholarships. So, for those of you that went to college, for those of you parents that went to college, right, I'd be willing to bet that probably this wasn't a thing back then. Okay, so every college offered scholarships for these, really talented kids that they were, that they wanted on campus. Now we got about 100 colleges, so there's not one kid on an Ivy League campus that's there on a scholarship, right? They don't exist. They don't exist at Tufts. They don't exist at Williams or Amherst or Colby or Bates or Bowdoin, MIT, right? I mean, again, about 100 colleges that scholarships do not exist. So I share this to say, because if you have a really bright kid that's looking at some of these really competitive schools, but you're also hoping scholarships can help make this more affordable, right, for you guys as a family. We just have to know that information. Are scholarships even a thing here? Right? Because I know how many gifted kids you guys have at the school, and I'm sure you're seeking some of these out. The last bullet here, again, probably news to most of you. Something that we are very busy with this time of year for the seniors in high school. Okay, so so your buddies in the class 2025 is going back to colleges and getting a better deal. What we're doing is we're negotiating for more money. We can't use that word. The colleges get too freaked out by it, so we have to play by their rules, and we use the word appealing. We are appealing for additional aid and/or scholarships. For us to have a successful appeal, or to maximize our odds of having a successful appeal, it starts now, when the student is a junior, a sophomore, a freshman, when they're still in the list building phase, because we have to apply to competing colleges, right? I use this example all over the country, not just here locally, but like, if you've gone a tourist to just a few schools just in the city, right? And maybe you guys loved Northeastern because it still had a little bit of a campus feel, and you thought the co-op was cool, but you really didn't like BU because it's just too urban, and you didn't like how it was kind of like, almost like built into the city, right? Obviously, that's not for everybody, whereas others, that's the dream. Um, if you tell me you love Northeastern but you hated BU, guess what? Too bad, you're still applying to BU. And I know you have no intention of going there. We're just going to use that offer to get a better deal from Northeastern. And guess what? It's going to work. And this is especially important if you're not eligible for need based financial aid, because we're going to say, I don't care if we're billionaires. Your direct competitor is offering me more money. If you don't come close or beat it, that's where we're going. Is it an empty threat? Doesn't matter. So again, that starts now. And I want you guys thinking about that again, especially if it's important strategy for everybody, but especially for those of us that are not eligible for need-based aid. And Peggy, if I could, let me just jump into the platform here, because I kind of want to bring some of this stuff together, right? The um Peggy started off with this formula: cost of attendance minus SAI equals need, right? And kind of gave you some examples and of it's cost of attendance we care less about. It's more about our SAI and how generous is a college in terms of the percentage of need that they meet, or the amount of scholarships that they're going to offer your kid. So for those of you that have created your accounts, we kind of took some of that mystery out of it. Here's your SAI. After you complete the FAFSA, this is what the federal government is going to say that your family can afford to pay per year per kid. That's your starting point, your foundation for what you're going to pay each year. Okay. And then to further confuse you, there's actually two models. So schools like Boston College, Columbia, I mentioned Tufts, Colby, Williams, Hammer, all those other ones, they all use the institutional methodology. Now there's a range there, right? Why do we see this, really meaningful range? Well, for this family, they own their home. They have a meaningful amount of equity. Colleges like Boston College, if you have $400,000 worth of equity in your home, Boston College says, awesome. That's a $400,000 checking account. They really don't see a difference between the equity that's in your walls and what's in your checking account, saving account, 529 mutual fund, etc. Okay. Then you're gonna have colleges like Tulane. I'm throwing that out there, where yes, they look at some equity, but not all of it. And the amount that they look at is tied to your adjusted gross income, your take home pay, essentially, right? And then there's schools like Columbia. Yeah, they use the institutional methodology, but guess what? They don't look at the equity at all in your primary residence again if you own your home. So that's confusing. That's a lot to digest. I just told you more than you need to know. Where I want you guys focused, what are colleges actually going to cost your family? And I don't care about the sticker prices. And this is a great example, right? This is a mass resident, a little bit above, I shouldn't say a little bit, above the national average, right? That's different than where we live in the Boston area here in terms of income and non retirement savings. And again, homeowners with a decent amount of equity. But for this family, it's going to be more affordable to send their kids to Columbia or Amherst College or Williams than it is to UMass Amherst, right? And a lot of families make a mistake, especially if they're concerned about affordability and say, well, you're only applying to public schools, state universities. That's not necessarily, and in most cases, is not, kind of a cost saving strategy, right? So we just want you focused on, what are schools actually going to cost your family? And well, actually, before I show you how to find out who's going to give you the most in scholarships, throw out some actual colleges. Put them in the chat. What's your kid's top choice if they have one, or the dream school, or your alma mater, or schools that you just toured on April vacation or know you're going to look at this summer. Put some colleges in the chat, and I want to look at their actual business model. Okay, so UCLA is a good one, right? I'm just out in that neck of the woods myself. Um, California, Los Angeles. What did I spell wrong here? Okay. So UCLA, amazing school, but guess what? They don't give discounts, especially and so yeah, it's not $100,000 a year, but it's pretty stinking expensive. And again, they do not give discounts. That is just kind of um that is just kind of their deal. Let's look at another popular great business school here locally, although this these Peggy, I used to beat these guys up around the football field here. This used to be the rivals, Bentley University. So let's click into Bentley, right? And we can do this for any school. So why are we getting a discount? Well, we're going to get $34,000 worth of need-based grants. This kid's a smart kid. They're also going to get a scholarship for 17,000, but we won't get both. They don't stack them. We're going to get the higher these two numbers, so we're going to pay 53,000. So, and just as you guys are exploring the tool, a great feature that we want you to be aware of is we have every scholarship. Um, for every college in the country, we have every scholarship that they offer, and we're really good at projecting, well, how much is your kid going to get, right? What percentage of need did they meet? What is their business model? Okay, what is the average scholarship that they give? And again, we'll tell you how much your kid's going to get, but you can also get a kind of a framework of what their averages are and what's their average GPA test scores. That gives you some answers in terms of the why. Well, is my kid projected to get a scholarship or not? At this particular school. And you can also change in your profile, guys. You can kind of fool around with, well, what if the GPA goes from a 3.4 to a 3.7? How would that impact the scholarship at these schools? Or what if we're thinking about, getting test prep help? What if we went from a 1100 um, SAT to a 1250, how could that impact things? So I, fool around with kind of the inputs there because we'll instantly project the outputs. But for those families, again, kind of as promised here, that are trying to figure out who's going to have be a good fit for my kid, but also offer us merit-based scholarships. We got dozens of filters you can use here, and I'll just kind of show you we'll just pick a couple, right? So you want a small school, and you are, not too many kids, and your kid wants to be close to home, and they want to major in um, the bio, right? And again, you can put all sorts of things in here, and then you just want to have them rank ordered based on who's going to give them the most in merit-based scholarships, right? That's what we can do, and we can instantly rank order them. And maybe Wheaton wasn't on the list, but they're going to give 42,000 regardless of your income. Maybe Clarkson, like actually a really good engineering school that's not necessarily a household name. They're going to give us 40,000, right? And kind of on down the way here. If you are eligible for financial aid, you can sort just based on that, right? So, okay, well, it's impossible to get into MIT, but here's some other colleges that are really good with need-based financial aid, and are also, maybe a little bit more palpable than the MITs of the world from an admissions standpoint. So there's a whole lot in here, right? But I think for right now, as you guys are just kind of in this list building phase, at least find out what are these schools actually going to cost you, and then what are some other ideas that at least surface level, right? We don't go too deep with admissions. That's what you have your school counselors for. That's where you have. I think you guys might be on the Score platform at Lexington. I forget, but our sweet spot is that affordability piece and trying to figure out, okay, not just what schools are actually going to cost me, but um where can I get some other ideas, right? As we're again building this list of schools, hopefully in collaboration with our kids.
All right, so let me share my screen again. And so let's get into actually talking about, I know we have a lot of 26 parents on here tonight. Like what's coming up? What is the next piece? You're building the list. We've gone over a lot of stuff of how to understand how to build an affordable list. But these financial aid forms are coming, right? They come in the fall of your child's senior year. So almost every school in the country requires the FAFSA. I'm going to hit on that right now, the free application for federal student aid. There's a second form called the CSS profile. Not surprising, deadlines are important, just like they are on the admission side, especially if you're eligible for need-based aid that we've talked about here. And it's really important in this process that you're in good communication with your child around emails they're getting, because the colleges tend to communicate with the student. It's their next chapter. They turn 18. They're quote unquote adults. I always thought that was funny with my two, but they are on paper. There's some privacy stuff. So make sure you've got communication there and that you're tracking what these colleges are sharing. And even if they're sharing, sometimes they're proactive and sometimes they're not. So let's talk about this FAFSA. Almost every school in the country requires it, and most of these schools use it to give out federal, state, and their money. And college institutional money is by far the best source of these discounts, not private scholarships that you hear all about and people get all worked up about. I got to find private scholarships. That's a little piece of the pie. These institutional grants or merit scholarships are really the name of the game for discount. So the FAFSA, as I said at the beginning, needs to be submitted if you want to be eligible for the need-based aid. And as Matt has already shared, you got to submit it at some schools even to get the merit aid that has nothing to do with your finances. So it goes live October 1 of your child's senior year. If you have a junior, rising junior this coming fall, you can't get in there yet. You've got to wait until your child's a senior, and knock on wood, it should go live October 1. As I already talked about, it's the prior year. So it'll be all about tax year 2024 this fall. A key planning opportunity with the FAFSA is if you are divorced or separated, only one biological parent is submitting the FAFSA with your child, with the student. And that parent is called the custodial parent. the definition of the custodial parent has changed. So if you have older kids or your neighbors have shared, it's different as of 2 years ago. The definition of custodial parent is the parent who provides the most financial support on a year look back from when you're submitting the form, not a tax year. So, for example, if you're submitting the form and there's some deadlines and you're going to meet all those deadlines and you're going to be doing it October 30th, it's a year look back from October 30th of this year. So we work with a lot of divorced and separated families, and a lot of them are 50-50 support, financial support for the child, or they're 60-40 or something like that. So this is a planning opportunity. If it's not even, you have time to figure out which parent, which biological parent is better to be submitting those forms. And then you want to follow the rules and be honest, figure out how that parent can provide more support on that year look back period. That the when Congress passed this, there was gray area there, right? So maximize that gray area if you can. I mean, some families, it's like one parent provides 80%, and that just is what it is, fine. But we see quite often that there's an ability to figure out how that family can put their best foot forward. I will say that if a parent remarries, that person, that new spouse, is part of the mix. And it doesn't matter if there's a prenup or that, we see all the time, like, say mom gets remarried and that their spouse has kids from a previous marriage, and they're not going to spend a dime on their stepkids. None of that matters. In financial aid, it's about that household. So if you're able to sit down and figure this out, if you're amicable, remember that the remarried person, that's going to be part of the household. This is something we help people with all the time because it's a little difficult. Sometimes it's difficult from a relationship standpoint. Even if people are amicable, they don't share their finances, we can step in and help with that. So only one parent is submitting. The other piece about this is that the student and whoever else it needs to contribute to that FAFSA needs to get what's called the student aid, federal student aid ID, FSA ID. You can see on the page, if you Google it, you're going to get to this studentaid.gov/whatever. You need to get that set up. You create a username and password. You create security questions. You put in your date of birth, your social security number. That information goes off to the Social Security Administration, and they verify that you are who you are. This can take a few days. So just do it this summer. Don't wait until the last minute when you're a few days from when you want to go into that FAFSA and the deadline's looming, because it's Murphy's Law, right? You wait till the last minute, and then Social Security Administration takes longer, partially because there's a lot of people pinging them, right? So just get it done this summer. The student always needs to get the FSA ID. That's how you're going to log in with them into their FAFSA. And then everybody else involved is called a contributor. So if you're married and you file married filing jointly, then one parent is a contributor. One parent will put in for the FSA ID. Remember, if you're divorced, only the custodial parent is submitting. So that's the only parent that needs to get it. And then there's a few other circumstances where if you're married filing separately, both parents need to get it. We'll get into the weeds more on that when it gets closer. And if you have questions, Matt put that link in the chat. That's a great question to a little bit get in the weeds with one of our experts so that you have your ducks in a row to figure out who should be getting that FSA ID over the summer. But you need to do that. So don't wait till the last minute for the FAFSA. So that's the FAFSA. The second form that I've referenced at least once tonight is called the CSS profile. And I would bet on my life that most of your kids have at least one school on their list. If you've got a child that age that's starting to build that list, that requires the CSS profile. So this is a second form that you need to submit to that college along with the FAFSA. It's not in lieu of the FAFSA. And they're going to get this and they're going to do some number crunching and calculate that second SAI that Matt showed you that said IM next to it. That stands for institutional methodology. That's the SAI/EFC that comes off of the CSS profile. And the colleges that require it are going to use that number in that equation of Cost of attendance minus SAI equals your need. So a few things that are significantly different about the CSS profile. One thing that's the same goes live October 1. Seniors, only seniors can get in there. It's about 250, mostly private schools. There's a few publics in there, UNC Chapel Hill, William and Mary, UVA Michigan, Vermont, close to you guys, threw their hat in the ring a couple years ago, or maybe just this year, because there was so much FAFSA craziness. But most of them are private. There's a few publics. Key thing around home equity. Remember what I said at the beginning, that your primary home is not included on the FAFSA. It is on the CSS. And Matt showed you that. He showed you that range of SAIs on that dashboard in our software. A lot of that is due to the home equity treatment. So as he told you, Columbia doesn't look at it, even though they get this form. That's just their philosophy, whereas BC looks at most of it. So that's a big deal, and you need to understand how these colleges in their business plan and in their calculations do that. But all the real estate is going to be asked about on the CSS profile, secondary real estate and your primary home. If you are divorced or separated, both biological parents are going to be submitting a CSS profile. The custodial parent that's doing the FAFSA will submit the CSS profile with your child. Then there's a non-custodial profile that the other parent will submit. They both go to College Board, which is the nonprofit your kids all are familiar with, I'm sure. They do APs, PSAT, SAT, and they also do the CSS profile. So that's going to go to College Board. It's private, and then the colleges are going to look at both parents. So stands to reason, if you have two parents that are both have careers, that's two sets of non-retirement assets and two sets of income. So that can shoot up the student aid index slash EFC for those families. If you are in a situation, which is unfortunate, but I had several of these this past spring, where the non-custodial parent, it's just not a good thing for their child to be communicating with them. It might be impossible because they're off the grid or whatever, or it could be that it's emotionally or physically not healthy for that child. There is something called a non-custodial waiver that can be submitted to the colleges. It can be uploaded to College Board. And it's well worth your while to do that. If you're in one of those situations, you're going to tell the college why your child should not be reaching out to their mom or their dad to ask them to submit these forms. And I've seen the waivers work time and again when there's a legitimate reason to request the waiver. But that's extremely important, because if you're just like, we can't get a hold of him, and you don't tell the college, then you're never going to get any aid from them, because they're going to look at your financial package as incomplete. And then business owners. Business owners, this used to be a difference between the CSS profile and the FAFSA. It no longer is. All businesses are asked about, even small family owned businesses, and they're going to want to know. The CSS asks you a bunch of questions about it. The FAFSA just says, what's your business value? And a lot of people kind of like, I don't know what my business value is. And some businesses actually have a value of zero. I had a business before College Aid Pro acquired me. Honestly, if I got hit by a bus, not a lot of value, because it was all me. I was the only consultant helping families. So that could be the case. Some businesses do have value, just like real estate. You don't want to lie, but you don't want to overvalue anything that you have. So that's the CSS profile, much, much longer than the CSS Pro and then the FAFSA. They don't really leave any stone unturned. And there are strategies to complete the CSS profile. We will get into that, in the fall with everybody. And we work with families all the time, helping them do this correctly, so they're not, hurting themselves by making mistakes and stuff. And then those SAI slash EFCs come out higher. But so those are the two forms, not the sexiest part of the process, but a very necessary part. I'm going to turn it back over to you, Matt, just to touch on how kids apply for admission and how that affects financial aid potentially.
Yeah,
I'm
and
like,
said simply, the most concise way, the difference between the two forms, right? We say some version of this internally. You can get through the FAFSA with a couple beers. You need a 30 pack to get through the CSS profile. I think that's again, if you want to if you want to gauge
a
21
30
plus
pack.
here.
Never heard of a 30 pack. I used to
Parents,
say a
yeah, welcome to
case, but
Boston,
yeah,
Peggy. Welcome to
case.
Boston. Um, all right, so look, this question, is one that just a percentage of you guys are going to be considering in the coming months, years, etc. Specifically, do we go early decision to a school? And early action, and it's easy to confuse these terms. We can apply early action to an unlimited amount of colleges, and we're not beholden to any one of them. And and it's a great thing if you have your applications prepared in time because you find out whether or not you've been accepted into the college earlier. And in most cases, you find out, what your financial aid package is or scholarship offer is earlier. So that's great. When it comes to early decision, if we decide to do this, we can only do it to one college, and we are signing a binding agreement. Now, we're not signing up for the military here, but it is a big deal that you are expected to take seriously. And as a matter of fact, your school counselor, at least one of them at Lexington High School, will have to sign off on it well. And it basically says if we get into your college, we're pulling our other applications and we're coming to you. And this is before we actually see a financial aid package. So this one, the magnitude of this decision is a lot higher, right? And it's one you got to take really seriously. So we get the question, I mean, so much, and we each answer it a little bit differently, but we basically say the same thing in so many words. And my talk track goes like this: Look, you have two big boxes that you need to check as a family, and you need to check them both with a lot of confidence. Number one, your kid just has to know, basically beyond a shadow of a doubt, this is where I want to go. This is my happy place. I'll do anything to go here. There's just like this is the spot for me. Okay, and not a lot of kids can say that. Who knows, right? When you're going through that decision making process, but some do. But you need to basically be somewhere there. Like this is where I have to go. Your financial obligation, number one, is to know what that college is going to cost you before you actually see the offer. And guess what? Since you came on this presentation tonight, there's no excuse, right? You have that information at your fingertips. Okay, so you have to look at that number over the course of 4 years. We can do this over 4 years, and we can afford this as a family. Um, and if you could say both those things, this is my dream school as the student, and yes, as a family, this is not, financially irresponsible based on the cost and based on our budget. God bless. You have our blessing, not that you need it, but let's go, bombs away. If we're really ambivalent on either one of those, it probably just tells us early decision isn't the right answer. Let's go early action. Okay, Peggy, and I think we got one more slide before I'll share in closing here. So look, I'm not going to get into this here. You guys can kind of see some of these check boxes and and these are really just best practices. Um, this is something we talk about an awful lot. It's something we love to do. And as a matter of fact, usually after May 1st, it's very hard to do this. We've still been doing it with the class 2025, and it's going back to the colleges and appealing for more money. And it's almost like this is more of a thing every single year. And part of it is we get a little bit more sophisticated and we have, a lot of large numbers and just organic relationships that we can leverage. But I think it's also more colleges are getting more uh, concerned with their yields, and they have to figure out a way to fill their beds. And if that means giving families that appeal the right way deeper discounts in order to get them to come to their school, then that's what they do. But the takeaway is the only thing I really need you to know for tonight is you're not going to accept the first offer. Just like you wouldn't for any other major investment you make in your life, right? And guess what? Of course it's presented that way. It's you've been accepted into whatever Stonehill College, right? My alma mater. Here's the deal, take it or leave it. No, that's not what we're gonna do. We're gonna advocate for ourselves, and we're gonna get a better deal in order, to make this, in order to make it happen. But it starts now. That process starts now, and that's kind of the theme in general, right? You want to have a better end result. You got to stay engaged now. You already took step one or whatever step you're on just by kind of showing up with us tonight. And what I'm going to recommend next, and I can share here, Peggy, and is I, I we want you, and again, I just think this is a great place to start the process with somebody one on one. Book a time with one of our experts. Do we have pictures of Jason or? Murph or Matt. No, but anyways, we have very experienced experts. You've had to been doing this on the front lines for at least 10 years to even be a part of our team in this capacity. We got folks like the director of financial aid at Harvard and MIT, the former director of USC is a part of our team. Um, I think we have the strongest team in this kind of niche space that we live in. But at least at any point, you can always book an hour with one of our experts, and it's $300, which I think is a good value. And if you write in and say I'm a Lexington parent, I'm sure we can get you a discount. But before you even do that, um, book a time slot for free, right? I think they're half hour time slots or something. And what we do in that kind of initial diagnosis or whatever, we'll take a look at your top three schools, and we'll just kind of gut check your financial aid and scholarship eligibility. Like, does this look right based on your family's financial profile, based on our experience with this school? Is that what you're going to pay? Is there anything you can do to lower your SAI, i.e., increase your financial aid eligibility, or put yourself in a better position, for merit-based scholarships? Are there any competing schools based on your top choices you should be thinking about? And then we want to leave you with at least one action item. Like, okay, your family's at this stage of the journey. You have a freshman in high school, or you have a sophomore, or you have a junior. And if you're a junior, you're obviously full on, the bullets are flying. You guys are in the thick of it right now. But here's your next best step. And that's something that again we kind of promise to deliver on. So that's a firm recommendation. We only offer this with some of our high school partners. Like for those of you that have seen us do these presentations and kind of other settings, that is not something that we do or is very atypical. So anyways, take advantage of that. Don't overthink it. And again, these guys are pretty stinking experienced, and if nothing else, they can um get you pointed in the right direction and answer some of the more specific questions. We had some great questions tonight, like, well, what should we do with our UTMA? And the answer to that is, well, it depends. For some people, we're going to say don't do anything because it's not going to make a difference. For other people, we're going to say, well, you should actually thinking about liquidating it, but then what should you do with it, right? Or can we convert it into a 529, right? There's about 10 different options that are going to make sense based on your family's situation. And again, that goes for a lot of things. There were some other really good questions in terms of like, does it make sense to borrow a percentage of this so we have cash flow and we can invest at maybe a better, kind of net rate than if we just paid everything cash, right? Very sophisticated questions, but the answers are going to depend based on, us having a better understanding of your more holistic um, conversations. And we have more, yes, our first kind of foot in the door here. This is just a free consultation, and if you're a family, which we try to help you self-identify, 90% of our kind of ecosystem of families, they just leverage our free resources through the whole process. There's other families that are like, I'll take an hour here, an hour there, whatever, at certain stages of the process. And then we have a smaller percentage of our families that we call our wake me up when it's over families that are just like, I don't have time for this. You guys do it the whole thing for me, or I have a very complex situation, or I'm a business owner, or we're going through a divorce and I just want somebody to, Jesus take the wheel type of deal. We have those services too. We just try to help you get where you should be as quick as possible. And that's usually the best place to do it is let us talk to you, learn a little bit of what you guys got cooking, and then we'll get you pointed in the right direction, and you guys decide what's best for you from there. So, um, anyways, so that's kind of that. Peggy, any famous last words?
No, no, I think it's well said. Yeah, if you chat with Jason or Kevin, because there were some good questions, and I've suggested a couple times, hey, it's that's a great question to talk with them through because there's follow-up questions to some of it. It's not always just boom, this is the answer. Because you don't want to look at this stuff in a silo. There can be a lot of different pieces to it. Yeah, people are asking, how do I estimate my home value? All those different things, those are great questions. That's it. Just here, Matt put the link of oh, nope, that's wrong because I just posted something else for somebody. Let me go grab it.
I got
There,
it. I'll put it in the chat here.
did you just put it in?
I can do it right now, but I'm just putting in
I
one more time. And again, if you guys already signed off or whatever, you just write into support at collegeapro.com. We got an unbelievable team that again will get you hooked up with us. Make sure you tell them you're a Lexington parent. Otherwise, they'll make you buy an hour, right, Peggy? They'll shove an hour
Yeah,
down.
tell them you were on this presentation and this is what we're doing. They know if you just tell them you're a Lexington family. But they're great questions, and let them kind of talk through it with you. And then they can also, tell you, hey, you need further support because there's other questions you probably don't even know you should be asking. And they can kind of steer you in the right direction and let you know how we can support you further in the process.
Yep. Peggy, thank you, my dear. As always, Lexington folks, you guys delivered again. I talked up a little bit of a game in the green room, and I said I think these folks will have some pretty good questions for us, and you very much did. So, at a minimum, guys, we'll say what we always do: just keep paying attention. We're not going anywhere. We continue doing this education throughout every kind of major pain point in the process. So, stay engaged, and you'll be in great shape.
Yep.
So let's
Everybody have a great night.
go Celtics. Hopefully, there's no panic over the Celtics, guys. We're not going to set the record for the most missed threes, for the whole series. So everybody relax, okay? Celtics in five. Good night, Peggy.
Good night.